Okay. Now we're live. Remember that old commercial? Is it live or is it Memorex? Right. No? You're not old enough to remember that commercial? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. That's it. That's it. Yes, before your time, Mary. Mm-hmm. Young lady. Oh, my goodness. Let's say that you are at a dinner party with some of your friends from church, and the conversation goes over a bunch of spiritual topics, and then suddenly, to your surprise and your embarrassment, your 15-year-old son announces with some belligerence that he no longer believes in God anymore, and he says it's really just irrational. There is no proof. And nobody had any idea that he'd even been thinking about these things. And there is a stunned silence. What would you say? What would you say? Don't answer that. Let me give you another scenario. It is the night of your weekly Bible study group. And during the discussion of Sunday's message on the Great Commission, a newcomer to the group says, who are we really to say that Christianity is better than any other religion? Because I think what the essence of Jesus' teaching is love. The same as all religions. It's not our job to tell other people how to live or how to believe. And the rest of the group just kind of sits there and fidgets awkwardly and doesn't say anything. How do you respond? One more scene. You're riding a shuttle with a friend who notices a Bible in your backpack. And they make the comment, well, I've read the Bible before, and yeah, it's got a lot of really interesting stories, but people really take it too seriously. It was only written by men after all, and men make mistakes. And you try and recall some of the points that your pastor made earlier about the Bible's inspiration, but you just can't think of anything. What do you say? Last one. You're sitting at the car dealership. You're watching TV while they're fixing your car. And a television news program comes on, and it highlights some religious groups that are trying to influence some important moral legislation. And the person who's in the waiting area sitting across from you says, haven't these people ever heard of separation of church and state? Those Christians, they're always trying to force their views on everybody else. You cannot legislate morality. Why don't they just leave the rest of us alone? And other people are there and they're listening, and you don't want to make a scene, but you feel you need to say something. What is your next move? Dun, dun, dun. I submit to you the 10-second window. The 10-second window. You have an opportunity in every one of those cases, but there are obstacles. First, you have to speak up kind of quick because the opportunity with that door being open is not going to last forever. And the silence is while the door is swinging closed. And you only really have about 10 seconds before the door closes. And then secondly, you yourself are conflicted because you want to say something, but you're also concerned about being sensitive and being a peaceful person and preserving friendships and not looking like an extremist. And what if I told you there was an escape from the challenge of each of those situations and allowed you to minimize awkwardness and engage the other person productively and gracefully. Productively and gracefully. There is such a thing. Challenge number one. It's not rational to believe in God. There's no proof. Possible response. What do you mean by God? What kind of a God is it that you reject? What specifically about God is irrational? Since you're concerned about God's proof for existence, what kind of evidence would you find to be acceptable? What arguments for God have you considered, and what did you find wrong with them? All valid responses, right? Second scenario. Christianity is basically the same as everybody else, and all it is love, 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 and don't tell people how to live, right? Maybe you could respond by saying something like, how much have you studied other religions? To find those common themes. And why would the similarities be more important than the differences? What do you think Jesus' attitude was on the issue? Did Jesus think all religions are basically equal? Isn't telling people to love one another just an example of doing what you're objecting to do? That is, telling people what to do and what to believe? Third challenge, right? You can't take the Bible seriously because it was only written by men and men make mistakes. Question for you. Do you have other books in your library? Were they written by men? Do you believe in the contents of things that are written in those books? Do those men make mistakes? I'm curious as to, if God did exist, He would be able to use humans to write down exactly what He wanted, wouldn't He? Do people always make mistakes when they write things? What makes the Bible less truthful than other books that are also written by men? Challenge number 4, right? It's wrong to force your views on other people. You can't legislate morality. Christians shouldn't be involved in politics. Separation of church and state, right? I have a question for you. Do you vote? When you vote for someone, are you expecting that person to pass laws that reflect your point of view? Wouldn't that essentially be forcing your views upon others? How is that different from what you're troubled about in this case? If you view that only non-religious people should be allowed to vote or participate in politics, what specifically in the Constitution excludes religious people from the political process? Do not all laws force some sort of morality? Can you give me an example of legislation that doesn't have a moral element under the law? And on and on and on and on and on. Some things to keep in mind about all of those responses. First and foremost, every one of them was a question. Every one of them is a question. Your initial response should not be to disagree with theirs, but rather to draw them out and to invite them and talk more about what it is that they think. And that takes a lot of pressure off of you, because when you ask a question, that puts the ball back in their court. It's just like a tennis match, right? They make a statement. The ball comes to you. You ask a question. Back it goes. Okay? Secondly, each of those questions is an invitation to thoughtful dialogue. They really are. I mean, you're opening the door to those opportunities. Your tone can be relaxed and cordial because you're not stating an opinion. But you are. But you're not. Because all you're doing is what? Asking a question. Right? Thirdly, these are not idle questions. We have a particular purpose for each of those questions. With some, maybe we're trying to gather information. With others, we're subtly leading the question and making a point. But yet in each of those things, the tactic is a maneuver that we have called the queen mother of all tactics. Okay? Because of the fact that it is a tactic that is so flexible. It is so easy to use. And it is simply called the Columbo effect. Now, y'all remember, Max, you don't remember, and Mary probably won't remember either, because she's so young. Okay? But you all remember Columbo, right? Our bumbling inspector, police inspector. Just a Peter Falk. I mean, what a guy. He's just a bygone era. He comes on the scene in complete disarray, right? I mean, his hair's a mess. His trench coat is all rumpled. He has that cigar, stubby cigar between his fingers, and his pencil. He's missing his pencil, of course, and so he has to bum a pen or something off of a bystander in order to take notes. To all appearances, Columbo is a bumbling, inept, harmless individual. He's not a threat at all. I mean, this is the inspector they send out for this. Oh, this will be a hoot. We look at him and we say, this is a guy who couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper sack. But even though he appears to be stupid, he's stupid like a fox. Because Lieutenant Columbo has a plan that accounts for his remarkable success rate. So after he pokes around the crime scene, you remember, he scratches his head, he mutters to himself, he makes his trademark move. He says, I've got a problem, right? I've got a problem. He looks around, he rubs his face. There's something about this that bothers me. And he just kind of thinks there for a moment and turns to the suspect and asks a question. You seem like an intelligent person. Maybe you can clear this up for me. Do you mind if I ask you a question? That's Columbo. Now, the first query is innocent enough. If he seems too threatening, he's going to scare him off. So he bumbles his way into asking the question. And for the moment, he seems to be very satisfied. He thanks the guy, he turns on his heel to leave, and just then, right, he stops and he turns back to the scene and he raises his index finger and he says, oh, by the way, just one more thing. And he sets the hook, right? Because just one more thing leads to another and another and another, and a point of distraction, and then ultimately annoyance. I'm really sorry, Columbo says. I know I'm making a pest of myself, okay, because I keep asking all of these questions. But I'll tell you, I can't help myself. It's a habit. That is the key to the Columbo tactic. And the key to the Columbo tactic, the Columbo effect, is to go on the offensive, if you're filling in the blanks, okay? Go on the offensive in an inoffensive way, with carefully selected questions which move the conversation forward. Never make a statement when a question will do the job. If you make a statement, you're opening yourself up. Now, there are a number of benefits of working through the Columbo effect. First of all, we find that questions, for the most part, are sincere, and they are friendly, and they are flattering. They invite interaction by focusing on something that the other person cares a lot about, himself or herself. I mean, if you ever read anything from Dale Carnegie, You know, how to influence friends, win friends and influence people. That's one of the first things he says. Get them to talk about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. Right? Sure. We all do. Even Max. Not really. Not really. You just have to pull teeth to get Max to talk about himself. Okay? Most people are not upset by questions. They like to give their input because everybody has this penchant for thinking that what they have to say is important. It's part of our human flaw. Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh my goodness. Now, second benefit is that you may find that you get an education in the process. You will leave that conversation knowing more than when you arrived. And sometimes what information you'll get is just what you need to be able to make a difference. Thirdly, questions allow you to make progress without being pushy. Questions are largely neutral for the most part. They seem that way, and they don't necessarily sound preachy. When you ask a question, you're not specifically stating your view, so you really should have nothing to defend. I mean, you're not crossing swords. You're just asking a question. When you're asking questions, you don't have any turf to protect. Now, you know, if they ask you a question, well, that's different. You know, it's fine. You can answer for your views. But for the most part, if you continue to ask questions, you remain in the driver's seat of the conversation. And the onus of responsibility is all on the other person. Questions offer a low-key way of maneuvering without opening you up to being accused of trying to proselytize someone. Questions also buy you some valuable time. Watch out for the spelling error there. I hate it when the computer spells it wrong. It was. I spoke the words and the computer picked the wrong form of buy. But that's okay. Questions can buy you valuable time when you're not really sure what to do next. And maybe as you ask questions, something that they'll share in an answer will help you be able to figure out what direction you want to move into. Finally, it may have occurred to you that Jesus did this. Jesus asked lots of questions, especially when he was facing a hostile crowd. And he often asked questions meant to either challenge the audience or silence his detractors by simply exposing their foolishness. Right? Master, the law says that we ought to pay tribute to Caesar. What do you think? They're trying to bait Jesus, and Jesus says what? Show me a denarius. Whose picture's on the coin? He asked a question. Leading question, but he asked a question. Well, Caesar's. Oh. We'll render to Caesar's the things that are Caesar's, and render to God the things that are God's. Boom. End of it. Right there. Master, was the baptism of John from heaven or was it from men? And Jesus said, well, let me ask you a question. And then he asked his question, and they said, well, we don't know. And he said, well, if you can't answer my question, then I'm not going to answer your question. Which is easier, Jesus said, to say your sins are forgiven, or to say, pick up your bed and walk? Jesus is not speaking idly in any of those cases. He understands the power of a well-placed question, and he always has a purpose for asking his question. And that's where Columbo is most powerful, when we have a game plan. And it's important for us to understand that. Now, whenever you get stuck in a conversation, always have a question to go to. Always have a question to go to, a fallback question. And you can always simply say, could you explain what you mean by that? Or what do you mean by that? And that allows for more details, lets the other person talk and explain and clarify and defend. You listen carefully. So the best first question, what do you mean by that? And you're gathering information. And there are three reasons why gathering information is very, very important. Okay? It's important because, first of all, we don't want to misunderstand the person that we are talking to. We want to make sure that we are clear in what they're saying. Secondly, we don't want to misrepresent the person, because if we misunderstand what they're saying and then we say to somebody else, well, Billy told me this, then we're misrepresenting Billy because we didn't understand Billy. And then thirdly, we don't want Billy to misunderstand himself. So we want to make sure that by asking the question, Billy is able to clarify what he really thinks and he really means by whatever it is that he's stating here. So this is all part of the Columbo effect. Being able to respond in such a way that it puts the ownership of defending any sort of position on the other person, and thus draws them out and exposes the falsehood. We're going to stop there today, and we'll pick it up next time. Any thoughts at this point?